So here to talk through this Sudoku puzzle called Diamond. It actually wasn't intended to be a Friday puzzle, but after testing it seemed that it was catching a lot of our solvers by surprise, at least even though it uses mostly simple steps. They're harder to find than usual and the solving path is sort of narrow, so this was maybe a good puzzle to focus on and just giving context to the approaches that are most useful. One thing that I do at the start of a Sudoku all the time is to try to minimize what I'll call unnecessary searches, and so I'll try to focus on ways of searching that are most likely to produce digits. The simplest one I describe, this is for beginners, is to look at groups of 3 rows or 3 columns, take any digits that's present twice and try to place a note or a sure form of the third number. And in the top of the 2 4s, make me try to place a 4 in the second row. Turns out I can exactly place the 4. There are no repeats down here. And the bottom 3 rows, there are 2 6s and there are 2 1s. So I'm looking for a 1 over here, no other information, so I'll just write a note that says a 1 is in the left cell or the right cell. And the 2 6s with this 6 up here reveals that. That instantly will set me thinking about placing more 6s, and I'll get a 6 up here and a 6 up here. And this note, and now this note, having dealt with all the 6s. That was looking at rows in groups of 3. Do the same thing. You should be meticulous when you do this about the columns as well, and so that gives me the fact there's a quick 3 to place in this puzzle, there's a 7 to place, there are no repeats besides the 6 we've now dealt with in the middle, and there are 2 5s over here, and there are 2 4s, and there's not more information at the moment to place at that. And at the most fundamental level that works for any kind of puzzle, but at a second level, one of the goals I had in giving this talk was to sort of show you some of the second level thinking. Is a reason that the patterns up here or the pattern in the center are relevant to look at, but the patterns down here are much harder to look at, is that one of the hotspots in any grid is a location where a single digit in a given row or column would eliminate all but 2 or even just 1 cell in it. And so in this shape that has 4 cells, the most interesting row is row 3, and the most interesting column is column 8. You say, well, why is that? Well, if something's in column 7 down here, it's still leaving 3 options behind. If something's in column 9, it's still leaving 3 options behind. It's something in these 2 spaces that can lead me to being able to write either a note or a sure digit. And so the most interesting thing in this corner is that you can place a 1 into those 2 cells. We're left with just a 2 3 left in this side, and there's not enough information from the single 2 3 that see this box to do more at the moment, but the sense of why you'd look in row 3 or column 8 up here is critical. And a plus shape pattern, or any pattern of this sort where a single row or single column eliminates a lot of space but again leaves 2 behind. So for instance in row 5, these 2 cells are the sole remnants of anything that's cleared. And so looking at just the 7 in that space, the 7's got to be in the top of the bottom, the 5's got to be in the top of the bottom. In the fifth column, the 4 and the 1 have this sort of space. And so I go by a pretty slow roundabout route to get the fact that the center cell in this puzzle was always set to be a 9. This is my classic bullseye pattern, as I call it. But the reason to that is that my search strategy is focused most on the exclusion of what's in this 1-4 space and the exclusion of what's in this space based on the fact that this row and this column are primed to look at. Now, if I solve Sudoku more like Kota Morinishi, the current world champion, I might just see the 9 immediately, and that's because I think he sort of sees negative spaces where I work more from positive spaces in the sense of what I see in looking at a grid. But hopefully that gives you a sense of why certain spots of a puzzle are critical to look at, is when you can look in a certain direction and reduce down to just 2 or even just 1 cell. So those are the best directions to first look at when just exploring a thing. Having filled this space, both this row and this column, I want to check them before I leave them. The column has a 2 3 8 in it, and there's a 3 in the top, which gives me a note down here. It should give me that note as well. The 2 and 8 don't do much. They can be in any of the cells at this moment. In this row, there is a 2 3 8 6 left, and while that is a 6 8 cell, and that's a 2 8 cell, and this is a 2 3 cell, and this is a 2 3 6 8 cell, I won't mark any of the pairs at the moment because they're not going to do any reductions, and that's sort of something I just don't do a ton of with my notes. But we'd seen before that there was a 4 in one of these 3 cells over here. We now actually have this 1-4 note that says it's specifically in just the top or bottom of those 3 rows. So we'll put that in, and that's effectively done with the center. We've covered this space, the last space in the puzzle that has this kind of prime areas for searches, now row 2 and column 2 specifically in this upper right box, so upper left box. The 8 comes across and eliminates all but 2, so we should be able to put an 8 node into this grid. I'm now hyper-focused on 9s and 5s, those being the missing digits. I see that 9 can't be in either of those spots, and I actually have identified again a naked single but coming from positive information of other digits up in the space. What does the 5 give us? It gives us a 5 over here. It gives us a 5 node up top for whatever good that's going to be. It doesn't look like it does too much immediately. We can do more over here in terms of writing some smaller notes. Now, the next immediate thing to think about is kind of the consequences. We're now sort of in this harder moment where now we have to get into these less prime corners, is to think about, again, now it really has to be, and this is the hardest kind of search, is it's always going to be intersecting digits that come into those spaces. So what I'm looking for in this space is a digit I have 2 times in these directions. 6 is not on my search list because I've placed all 6s in the grid. But a digit like the 7 looks rather interesting. I see a 7 here, I see a 7 there. It's actually the only digit I see that's in both of those spots, and it tells me that there's a note I can place about 7s in this corner. Over here, the most interesting thing at the moment is the 4, and this 4 come to be something like that. And I also see a 5 and 5, and that comes to be something like that. And so this gets me focused on 2s and 8s in this region, and at this exact instant, the 2 isn't going to do much. It's going to be in one of these 4 cells, but there's something that's sort of appealing to this spot here that, to me, and this is the tricky part of this puzzle, the hardest step probably of this puzzle, is to recognize that this column is crucial to look at, and specifically the fact that this needs a 1, 2, 8. There is an 8 that's blocking the cell, and so there's a box line reduction. It's a fancy name, but it says that an 8 must be in one of these spots, so it's in none of these spots. And now we get to the hard step that just solvers won't see or will be slow to see, which is that we have a corner, we've made 8 notations in it, and a consequence when you have just 1 digit left to fill is that naked singles can sit in any of the spots that only see just one thing. So this could be a 5 or potentially a 2. Let's not even look at the rest of the puzzle. You can obviously see from the camera that this can't be a 2 and must be a 5, so we're going to get there soon. But look at this spot. This could be a 4 or a 2, but nothing else. This could be an 8 or a 2 or nothing else. This could be a 5 or a 2 or nothing else. So we check these 3 spots. We see this spot is the one that sees a 2. And so looking just at a region that's almost completed with numbers, missing just 1, I can get, again, another naked single, which is right there. The 2 at the moment doesn't do too much for anyone. It's still seeing 5 potential places. But we can mark things in this way. Having placed this, we get a second challenging step, but one that ideally solvers can see by following forward. This bottom row is screaming out for a 2, 3, 8, and 7, and looking vertically in these spots, we see that over here there's no potential for an 8, so an 8 has to be in these 3. An 8's not there. We get a second box line set up. It's like this. And now, sort of what's the most interesting cell in this row? The most interesting cells for me are always the ones I've yet to make a mark in. And the only one in the bottom row that's empty, like this is an interesting cell, this is an interesting cell. It doesn't have any notations, but it started with a 2, 3, 7, or 8 requirement. In the region it's in, it has a 3 and 8 marked right now. This being a box line type reduction because it's not up here. We marked that very early in the puzzle. this being an 8 over here, this not being a 2, there's another naked single. And it just turns out some solvers are poor at spotting these things, and I was poor for a long time until I learned all the ways to leverage my notations to get at them. And after placing this 7, you can get a 7 up here, you can get a 7 over there, and the reason I like these notes is it makes pairs stand out so quickly for me. And so we have a 7-4 pair over here. Doesn't immediately give us much until we recognize that we now have eliminated these 2 spots for other numbers in the space, and the one that is coming across and eliminating this is making a prime situation for no 1 here, no 1 here, must be a 1 up in the top. You get a note like that, you force here, force these digits. The notes force other numbers very quickly, and so here I'm really just looking at the last note I considered and writing the relevant effect, and from here it's mostly just bookkeeping work, and this is where I'll often write far too fast and make a mistake, and that's just a consequence of speed solving, but right now I'm not doing too much speed solving, so it's not the biggest concern. But the hope I had for giving this presentation was that you'd see some of the second order ways I use my notation, and particularly ways I isolate parts of the puzzle that we're searching for. And again, the general lesson is that most solvers are slow in Sudoku not because they're slow at the steps that are required. Most of the basic steps everyone understands, but it's that the search patterns they use to go through them are somewhat inefficient. And so if your eyes are drawn to the center but not to this box or not to that box, because of the fact there's a plus shape in the center and it has elimination pathways to the left and to the top and bottom for these kinds of digits, you'll get much faster puzzles, or at least handcrafted puzzles like the ones I made, and I will fix this mistake before I post it. So that is now a completed grid. Hope you learned something about the puzzle, and we'll see you next time.